This is the Final Round Podcast, coming to you live from the FingerLakes1.com studios in downtown Seneca Falls, New York. And now your host, Chris Marquardt. Good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to episode number 26 of the Final Round Drag Racing Podcast, coming to you live from the FingerLakes1.com headquarters at the North Park building here at Academy Square. We've got Patrick Budd joining us here on the hotline to talk a little bit about Empire Dragway, some of the changes, the fact that the season never stops with all the planning and everything that's already been going on there, a little bit about some of the champions and the season as a whole as we reflect back on 2017. But Patrick, you're giving proof already that the season never really stops with all the stuff that's going on over there. Big news about some transitions, trying to get a smoother ride on the track, and then a little bit of a logistical change for all the drivers that are going to be in competition over there at Empire.
Yeah, let me set myself up for interesting 48 hours on the phone. One thing we are going to change next year, and it's the world's worst kept secret, is we're going to make the switch to 8th mile for our Saturday program. We started looking into this. I guess Jerry started looking into it last year, and we were looking at some of the car counts that we get with our box, no box races that are contested on the 8th. A lot of phone calls that we received and input from guys that were racing in tracks that were a little farther away. They want to come play at Empire, but they had an 8th mile set up, and they said, if you ever change, let us know. Now, we're not trying to get new racers at the expense of our current guys.
Sure.
That's not the case, but we think that we can better serve the region if we're an 8th mile facility for that deal than quarter mile.
Bunch of questions right off the top. First off, the divisions won't change, just the distance.
Yeah, just the distance. So the quarter mile was always the golden standard, and as cars have gotten faster and faster, in some cases it's because of the shorter shutdowns. With us, that's not a problem.
Right.
But in a lot of cases, things have gone down to the 8th. And what's interesting is if you look at the survey that Bill Bader sent out to his racers, I think their return was somewhere in the neighborhood of 70% preferred the 8th. Now that it's something that folks are getting used to, they've taken to it.
The 8th mile itself, that's no problem, but the quarter mile track is going to remain there. Is there any likelihood that there would be special events or select use that would use the full quarter mile?
Yeah, we're not throwing anything away. Mm-hmm. You know, the track is flexible to be used any way that anyone would want to, whatever configuration. The track surface from the 750-foot mark to the finish line is pretty much pristine. So From the starting line to the end of the racetrack, we got a pretty quick facility. We're aware of the fact that the shutdown is a little bit bumpy. Mm-hmm. We're going to try to deal with that a little bit over the spring as things start to warm up again. There's some processes that we've become aware of that may smooth things out and allow some faster cars to come onto the property. So there's a lot of, like you said, there's a lot of things happening. Russ never sleeps.
What do you get to do in the off season here? You work there full time. You're still at the track just about every day, making phone calls, setting stuff up for 2018.
Well, yes and no. I'm not there as often. The tower doesn't have heat, and Jerry shuts all the water off, so it would be a pretty Spartan existence. So I hang out at home probably 3 days a week, and then I spend a couple days there in Leicester just hanging around with Jerry, going over stuff, and learning more and more about the business end of the facility so I can continue to grow.
I liked what you said about trying to gain racers, but not doing that at the expense of the local racers at the same time. That's probably an important thing for a lot of the drivers at the track to hear, because just like with any motorsports, the driver pool can be fickle, and they can become very upset very fast. What's the plan at this point to try and make sure that those guys come back and still feel welcome when you transition to that 8th mile program?
Well, you can't suddenly make the length different for them in the lane that they're in as opposed to the other guy, right? So That's obviously not going to work. What we can do is be, sensitive to what their thoughts are. Make sure that we listen. If it turns out that, we made a decision that didn't work out, of course we can revisit it down the road. We don't want to sound wishy-washy, but,
right.
We're not so pig-headed that we can't listen.
Sure.
I think that when they see a different level of competition, more cars in the lanes, things of that nature, it allows Jerry to continue to reinvest into the property and to reinvest into his purse. Last year, for example, the Super Pro winner purse went up $250 mid-season. There wasn't a lot of fanfare, but he just did it because pretty much everything that comes in, he spends on either updates or paying back to the racers.
Right.
He doesn't need this income to live, so we're in a very lucky situation.
That is a big part of it right there. Having somebody who's independent and the track is just a hobby allows that to continue to grow and not be a revenue source, so to say, other than just trying to keep feeding the monster. And I liked what you said there about having more cars in the lanes. I think everybody wants to see more cars there. You can easily go to your local track and race against the same 10, 15 guys, but if you've got a change that's going to shorten the track a little bit and might change what you're accustomed to, that's going to help bring more numbers in as a whole, I think the competitive side, a lot of those drivers, is going to take over.
It does change the strategy.
Sure.
There's a lot less of the wheel-to-wheel stuff on the 8th mile compared to the quarter. So some guys are going to have to change up their game a little bit. You're going to have to dial a little bit tighter and trust the dial. Mm-hmm. But with the concrete, or with the 8th, it's going to be fully concrete from one end to the other. Right. We're going to be able to groom the entire 8th and make sure that it's in the best shape that we can possibly make it, week after week after week. So that's a plus. I think that we may end up with a slightly more consistent racetrack.
Right. I think also you might be able to keep a couple guys happy by running that periodically, the full quarter. It doesn't sound like any of you say you're not throwing anything away. It doesn't sound like any of the maintenance is going to fall off on the long term of that. With also, you're already looking at the shutdown area and making some upgrades to that because it is on the bumpy side.
Yeah, it's not a complete tear up. I mean, if anyone's priced asphalt on a half a mile return road, it's pretty scary.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that there's not improvements that we can't make in conjunction with the cookhouse that was built, the change on the racetrack, the equipment that was purchased. There's been a lot of stuff done, and if we can get the sponsorship, we don't actually need the money, but we need to have enough commitments. And if we can see where we're at next year and it looks good, we're gonna try to add concrete barriers through the length of the quarter mile.
Wow, that'd be pretty nice, wouldn't it?
It'd be a lot safer,
yeah,
and
no doubt.
It would allow us to pull in a different caliber of program.
Sure. Has anybody got into the rails that you've got now this year? I mean, is that something that's happened on a periodic basis?
Guardrails really aren't. They're not as bad as the reputation that they get if they're done correctly.
Right.
When Bob Metcalf put this track together, he's got twice as many uprights as he needs to have. None of them are wood, everything's steel. Mm-hmm. It's a really good setup, and it is somewhat forgiving. It does give a little bit on impact where concrete doesn't. Where that stuff's scary is if it becomes unattached from the posts, it can go through the car kind of like like a can cutter. Uh-huh. The other thing is if a car tends to get on top of it, there's always the scoreboards to worry about. Right. And that's my biggest fear. Believe it or not, it's not on-track incidences. I just don't want to ever see anybody tangle with twin I-beams. And that's any racetrack because they're all put in a similar location. But by running the 8th, you get these 7-second dragsters calm down a little bit before they go into that area.
How do you move the finish line? You just move the lights and leave the boards where they are?
Yeah, because our lights, our timing system is the 60, 330, 8th, 1,000-foot mark, and then the quarter mile. So all we do is we can leave everything hooked up. We just switch the computer to recognize the sensors up to the 8th.
that makes a lot of that headache go away quickly. I was thinking about,
because we've run 8th mile races quite a bit at Empire, quite a bit, and it was the success of those races that led us to think that, you know, we can bring in some of these guys that have been calling us that don't have a place to race without configuring their car differently, or they've been 8th mile racers a long time. And again, it's a touchy subject because you don't want to think that, you know, you're placating one at the expense of another. We just think it'll work better for us for a while anyway.
Have you got a lot of feedback yet?
No, because I'm telling you, you're the first person I actually told.
Well, I figured that your phone would start blowing up right away.
It's downstairs with the ringer off on the counter. I'll be returning calls later.
That's perfect. I know you guys had the 8th mile races before, but just in my own senselessness, I figured that there would be some sort of I don't know how permanent that 8th mile setup was. And I was envisioning you guys having to do a little bit more work, but that's
it's just a matter of unplugging something, or it's very simple. You just change up. But as a spectator, here's the thing: bracket racing has a really hard time attracting spectators.
Yes.
So do a lot of class cars. Somebody goes and they watch an 8th mile race. It happens a lot quicker. It's better for a short attention span. The cars go from the burnout box to the shutdown more frequently. It's like bam, bam, bam. From a promoter, you know, aspect, we get the cars off the racetrack quicker if they use the short shutdown. Even if they don't, we can launch the cars behind them a little sooner because we have a spotter down there that makes sure that they're gathered up and safe.
Right.
And it just makes things a little bit quicker and smoother for everybody, I think.
The timing of it, I get that in terms of, you know, keeping people occupied and there's not as much downtime. But how about on the cars themselves? I mean, you're going to have this format is going to be a bit of an equalizer. People are going to have to take what they knew as gospel for their quarter mile and adjust it somewhat. So you're going to have different people. Theoretically, you're going to have different people in the pits. You're going to have new guys rising to the top. What about the wear and tear on the cars themselves? Because you're going to be launching a little bit different. You're going to be shifting a little bit different. Is that going to be reduced, or are they going to be counting more on the line to get out faster because they've only got an 8th mile to work with?
In theory, the engines and transmissions are going to see less wear and tear, but in reality, the valve springs are probably beat up most in the water box, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, it's a relative thing. So, yeah, you know, I think so. The other deal is if they're on the throttle longer, an oil down would hopefully be less likely. Because you know they're coasting quicker. Who knows? The biggest benefit isn't mechanical so much. Today's connecting rods, valve springs, all that stuff is of such high quality that we don't experience a lot of breakage.
Right. The oil down thing, is that any different in terms of the cleanup on concrete versus on asphalt?
A little bit, because there's less porosity. It doesn't get down in there. Hold on just a second.
Sure. Talking a little bit with Pat Budd with Empire Dragway as the track has endeavored to transition to an 8th mile program for the 2018 season. It's still going to periodically run on the quarter mile track, but it's not going to be the staple, which is one of the things that there's been a lot of feedback from the drivers in the area that have looked for someplace to race, and it's sort of one of those.
Look at it this way. I mean,
I didn't know you were back. Sorry.
Town last year with the divisional, they were running the 8th.
Right. Sorry, I didn't realize you were back already. I was just trying to bridge time.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, Ron Rigby, track photographer, is here. He's going to shoot my wedding, which is a week from Saturday. So he's sorting out things with Christina, my fiance. So I had to just kind of set the phone down for a second, you know, make sure that they knew I was interested. So I'm fine. I'm back.
Okay. But you were saying take a look at it from this perspective.
Well, I mean, there's a couple. I kind of forgot where I was going because I was listening to them. But there's just a lot of different ways to look at this. When the divisional came, we talked to some guys that ran the deal, and they were regional. They weren't local. And we asked him, you know, what's your preference? And just to a man, it just seems that this is the way to go.
Well, I mean, I like the idea of it. It's neat to think about that transition, and you're going to have this influx of theoretically, on paper at least, it sounds like you're going to have this influx of additional talent, which is going to deepen some of the pools, and you're going to see new people potentially rise to the top, and you're going to see guys that, at least for the first couple weeks, that have been experienced and skilled out there in the quarter mile, have to refigure things out. It's going to equalize a little bit.
They've got data to the eighth on all of their quarter mile runs, though. The ticket spits out the data. So if they can look at that eighth mile hit, that quarter mile hit, look at the air conditions, there's data there to be gleaned.
Sure.
They're not starting from scratch as if it were the inverse, right? Where they were eighth mile racers, and we said, no, we're gonna take it back to the quarter and go change gear ratios and figure it out. But
you said something else there that I caught, that now the entirety of the eighth mile is going to be concrete. Is that also an upgrade?
It is. It to me, it makes for a more consistent racetrack by a wide margin. You're asking about cleanups. Asphalt, because of its texture, the oil seeps down in there, right? It's harder to dig up and get out because asphalt's flatter and it's less porous.
Right.
Same thing with a tire. The tire makes more contact with the concrete. Plus, with the concrete, we can scrape it with heat. We have a lot more options to get old rubber off without destroying the asphalt itself. So what we hope to offer is damn near a national event surface, as well as we can do with the equipment that we have.
Sure.
Every Saturday.
What's the concrete mean for prep? In addition to getting the rubber off, you're going to be able to basically go the whole thing as well, right?
It's a lot more forgiving. It really is. It's a lot more forgiving. You can make more. You can make a mistake. You can get the rubber up and off a lot quicker. It's just a better way to do things all around. The prep isn't all that different, like I said, except that you can do more things to it without pissing it off. Because asphalt's pretty soft,
right?
And you can't exactly take a 750,000 BTU torch and start scraping rubber off the top of it. You're going to start pulling up some of the top coat,
right?
And with the concrete, it's not a problem. You just take care of business.
That sounded pretty good. And
it does. I'm excited, bro. I got to tell you something. I cannot wait to pound a bunch of resin down in that new stuff and just drag tires all over it for a day. It's going to be cool.
That also should get rid of some of the bumpiness that was out there past that second transition, right?
It looked like ass out there too. Like if a racer, comes and walks your track.
Right.
I remember the day that we had Troy Levy's deal. It was at 8th Mile Quick 8. And Jason White, he's got that Pro Mod, the Studebaker. Him and his brother were walking down the 8th one side and then doubled back and come back my way. Well, I'm scraping. And as soon as they went to the 500 and they looked down where it went from concrete to asphalt, we used to have to fill these transitions in with like different kinds of asphalt products that applied smooth for different reasons and blah blah blah, but it looked like hell.
Right.
So the shock graphs didn't show much. We did a decent job keeping it under control. So I mean, cars didn't feel it as much as it looked bad. But now we got our dress pants on a little bit,
Right. There was some drainage related cracks and stuff that were in there that you had to smooth out, and that's going to get it.
Yeah, the wiring for the see. What people got to remember is Route 66 or ZMAX. Those are like the best tracks nowadays. In its day, Empire was like damn near that level because of its size. If you look at the water box to the starting line to the end of the finish line, it's one of the longest tracks in the country.
Right.
And so all the wiring and cabling that went under there to feed the PA and all that other stuff, it just gave up. It just gave up, and stuff started to implode, and that stuff started probably 10 years ago.
Wow.
It just reached a point where we weren't comfortable making it right and having it look that way and present that to our customers. It just, no, it's not acceptable.
What else is going to be happening before we get up to the point where we can start doing testing and tuning in 2018? Is there anything else that's on the to-do list?
Well, we've got the new concession area. That's an 80-footer. It's pretty long, and it's got an overhang where we'll be doing barbecuing, pig roast, stuff like that during the race day. It should be fun. We're moving the older concession stand, the original one, over to the I call it the passenger side of the track, over on the spectator side. And that'll be for larger events. We'll be able to capture the revenue because we often had lines at our concession stand that were 60, 70 feet long, and you're missing an opportunity for sales when you do that.
Sure.
So hopefully we'll be able to, make our fans happier, our racers' family happier, and put a little bit more revenue so we can keep doing stuff like that. The top end is something we're looking at. The guard walls are something that is past the planning stage. Now we're just trying to understand the financing.
Right.
Acquiring sponsorships and setting up dates. I got a few dates set up. Which is fun. We've got the Asphalt Wars returning. We've got our truck show, the diesel versus gas, returning. Did I say Asphalt Wars?
Yes.
Okay. Gold Cup, obviously, that's our own event. That's going to be returning. We're not going to do the Purge this year.
No.
And there's a couple other things that we have on tap as well.
I mean, it sounds like you guys have got
Street Outlaws. That's going to be July 1st and 2nd. So we've got that too.
I trust the gas racing series and the Mustang on Mustang tour will be back.
Yeah, and they're both revitalized. The Moms thing, I don't want to speak on their behalf too much, but Moms Racing is looking to make it a multi-mark deal. So you can run LS motors and Hemi motors and late model muscle with Moms now.
Okay.
I don't want to bust out all the particulars because I don't write their rules, but I review them, and it's really neat. They're going to be doing some cool stuff in 18.
That's cool. I like the sound of that.
Yeah, because this deal's been running since '94, right? It's the longest heads-up Mustang, blah blah blah, in the country. And Mom comes every single race. Jamie's mom is there in the tower. She loves this stuff. Jamie Meyer still loves this stuff. And we know that it needs a resuscitation. We know that. It's gotten weaker. It's still a good show, but it doesn't have the participation it once did. And the energy is starting to lag a little bit. So it was time for a change.
Well, opening it up, that's something that we're going to follow through the off season and try to get them on to talk a little bit more about that topic, because that's a step away from the purist side of things, but man, it could make for some really compelling storylines when people are lining up to take the lights.
Yeah, back in the day, there was only a 5.0 or a 5.7 liter GM product. In '94, if you think about it, we were still using the 23-degree small blocks and all that other kind of stuff. So now with today's marketplace, you've got a lot of Mopar products. You've got those Durangos. You put a little bit of, work into those. Not the Durango. Is it the Durango, that little SUV thing that comes with a Hemi? I see them going 10s all the time. Is it a Jeep?
It's the Durango. The Durango has it, and then the Dakota has it too. It's a Magnum motor. Yeah,
and we see these things on Friday night going bananas. And meanwhile, Mom's is running the same night. You know what I mean? So it was time.
Right. Only makes sense now, right?
Well, drag racers are not known for their intelligence.
Oh man, that's
brute force and ignorance, buddy.
The season as a whole, it sounds like everything went pretty well.
First half of the season gets a C-.
Okay.
We were learning our way. We had a lot of new staff. Our pace, as far as getting the show in, needed to improve, and it did. We were learning our way as far as track prep, because I was new to the place, and this was something new to me. And we had a lot of rain. That was the big reason I give it a low mark. It was the rain, the rain, and the rain. Now, the second half of the year, starting with Asphalt Wars this past season, we started to pick up a lot of steam. People were starting to talk about the track. There was a little bit more of a buzz because numbers were starting to get run at the track. And with some better weather, we started pulling in some good days. We started pulling in some real good car counts toward the end of the season.
And that's all a product of that evolution. I mean, simple as that. The more good people hear about it, the more people want to see what they're working with. So hopefully that momentum continues, and this transition it bodes well. I mean, with that many people saying that's the direction that they want to go in multiple different places, it would seem that going to the 8th mile format, you're going to see more cars. Just as simple as that.
What racers I hope that they can see and understand is that there's not enough cars to be a local racetrack anymore.
Right.
You have to be regional. You may not have to be national, but you have to make sure that you're attracting as many people within that 7 or 8, zip codes or not area codes, around your facility. And if you're not doing everything you can to cater to the largest number of people, you're going to be in trouble. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, there'd be I can't remember the number of cars in Super Pro, and they were all doing wheel stands, and there was just a level of excitement that we can get back,
Mm-hmm. But by going to that regional format, I mean, we're also talking about a time when you were a kid that everybody had a race car. They either had a race car that went to a dirt track, or they had a racetrack that went to an asphalt oval, or they had a drag race car. Everybody had one, and those days have since gone. So you've got to widen your footprint and make that appealing on the regional level.
And that's exactly it. And try to make sure that we continue to offer a better product in terms of pace, a clear, concise schedule that we keep to on the weekends, good track conditions, and all those other things that make people happy. We just have to be the best we can be. And, tell everybody we want to be your favorite racetrack, because we do.
The change with the asphalt, does that give you guys more opportunity in terms of scheduling with bigger series? You alluded a little bit to that with the addition of those concrete barriers running the length of the track that would give you some more diversity in what you can bring in.
The track before we fixed it was good enough. The NHRA has courted us 3 times this past season. Mm-hmm. When they walked the track, they said that there was National Event Services that had bigger problems than ours did.
That's. I don't know if that's good or bad. Like, how do you take that?
It's just a testament to what you can get around. And in reality, if you look at how fast a tire is rotating, if those transitions are pretty small, it's not going to upset a tire that's got probably 130 inches of circumference at speed.
Mm-hmm.
But they looked at the track, and and they were, what you need is you need guard walls. So that's really our not problem. That's our next opportunity to grow is to get the guard walls so we can attract racers that require that.
Mm-hmm.
Like Pro Stock Cars, Pro Mods, some other things like Nitro Harleys or something that we could bring in to have a couple laughs with.
The Sportsman Shootout Weekend, is that going to be off the schedule now because of the transitions
with IHRA?
With IHRA's transitions? What
they have now, I got to be correct, but I don't pull punches.
Okay.
The IHRA deal, when they come to town, the track operator has to foot the bill for a lot of things.
Right.
Planes, hotels for staffing, things like that the racer doesn't know about. So the track operator is not actually going to make money on the race. What he's trying to do is have that halo effect of having a divisional race and being at that level.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what sense does it make to incur expenses like that if we can turn around and maybe offer a richer purse on our own?
Sure.
Now, that being said, it doesn't mean we're out and we're not going to do it. It doesn't mean that. It just means that there's a couple of schools of thought, because you can administrate your own box, no box. We're not looking to tech super stock cars here.
Right.
Different animal. So, they'll probably be back. I know that John O'Neill and Jerry get along very, very well. But I can't lie. I mean, it's a lot less attractive at this point unless we know more.
Well, I mean, if you're going to spend that money, ideally, if you're going to invest that money into hotels and into flights and stuff like that, which
per diems.
In whatever way you look at it, if you're going to spend that money, it's going to be coming out of the bank account. Wouldn't it be better to put that into the driver's hands versus other places?
I think so.
Right.
And Jerry's the kind of guy that gives back too, because I remember last year, I think it was Street Outlaws. I was just announcing for him then. He added $500 to a purse because he had such a good day.
Right.
Just put 500 on it. So yeah, he'll give back.
Sure. I mean,
he's a grouchy son of a gun, so a lot of people don't realize how generous he is.
You're ruining all the street cred by talking about this stuff.
I know. I've learned an awful lot from the guy. I thought I had a work ethic until I started working with him, and he's made me elevate my game. Just because he's 67 and I don't want to be ashamed. Right.
The season wrapped up with Ron Dean winning the bike sled championship and went down in the record book as the Empire Grand Champion. Paige Montgomery came away with the Junior A Championship and the World Championship. Matthew Vogler coming away with the Junior B Championship. Sam Capizzi Jr. won the Street Championship. John Sear Jr. won the Pro Championship. And Don Keuchel won the Super Pro Championship. All those drivers are going to be recognized at the year-end banquet that's coming up in January. At this point, additional details to follow in due time.
That's Jerry's end of things, and when it's his end of things, he doesn't really tell me much. He just does it.
You'll know when it's time, right?
Yeah, hey, put this up on the web.
Okay. What about for you? I mean, I remember in the spring you were so excited about getting into this position as essentially a dream job, and now you've been able to go through it for a year. Obviously, it's been a learning experience. You've learned a lot. What struck you so far as this evolved through the course of 2017?
Well, my role changed a lot.
Yes, it did.
Yeah. I was going to announce. That was the deal. I was going to carry Jerry's track phone because he hates it, and it rings nonstop. So I handle the phone, I handle the email, and all that other good stuff. And then I was supposed to announce on the weekends, and that didn't last long. Somehow, I really took to trying to learn more about traction compounds and the resins and things like that. And then I became pretty anal about the starting line. And let me tell you, just slightly off topic, what'll screw up a run more than anything isn't how much glue is down or a little bald spot or this, that, or other thing. It's if the car ahead of you, like say, has tailpipes and they drop a mist of water on the starting line that you have to then go launch off of.
Right.
And what I learned was if you're not on that starting line with that mop constantly going back and forth and with your resin tank back and forth and your track clean back and forth, it doesn't matter how much glue you put on it because your starting line is going to suck.
Right.
So that took me out of the announcer thing and put me on the starting line for the most part. And then I, do some gopher stuff for Jerry, I'm thirsty, something like that. And pull some cars, but more of a jack of all trades than I thought I'd be. And I love it. And I freaking love it because back when I was had a chassis shop or used to build my own engines, I liked the process, and track prep is a lot like that process. It's obviously larger in scope, but it's the only way you get decent with it is hard work, and you can't fake hard work.
I like that. That's very valid. You can't fake your way through that for sure.
No. And we got to get better. We're looking at maybe changing traction compounds, going back from VP to VHT. We don't know. We're going to talk to some people at PRI. We had good luck with the VP, but there is a little bit of a stigma surrounding it with some of the pro mod type guys. And problem with VHT for the longest was to be honest with you, cost, and I don't know that it's that much better, but we're going to find out. We're going to talk to them. So we're always looking to get better.
There's never never a spot that you can cut corners and not notice it when you own a racetrack. It's whether it comes to fan interaction, driver interaction, whatever. If you don't have your best foot forward in all fronts, somebody's going to notice it, and they're going to tell somebody, and that news is going to spread.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to be badass, you gotta do it. You gotta get after it. You gotta spend 100 hours a week on mowing the grass. That's a lot of payroll for grass, but you got to do it. If you want to schlep along and have a little program and let the weeds grow, You can probably bump along and make a buck, but I think that the market's getting a lot more difficult now.
Sure.
And if you don't offer more, I mean, our pulling track is going to be done September 1st of 2018. We're going to be bringing in tractor pulls.
Mm-hmm.
So, these are things that have to happen for us to, continue to grow and reinvest.
Where are you putting the pulling track?
Okay, there's an asphalt section near the scoreboards, near the ET shack. They used to be called the top fuel pits. Back behind there on the east, figure east of that a little ways, okay. There's a large area that's been cleared and flattened and whatnot. And then Jerry's back surgery kind of slowed that deal down. He doesn't let us play with his real big stuff. His big equipment.
Right.
That still sounds wrong. Anyway, so that got started, and that should be finished. And we're going to be actively looking for people to spray mud.
Yeah.
The guys that are putting on our gas versus diesel show have some pretty deep connections in mud pulling, and they told us that if we get this thing done in 2019, we may be able to get a national level event in there. This region is starved.
So you're talking national level pulling tractors or national level mud bog?
Pulling tractors.
Pulling tractors.
I'm sorry if I said it's all the same to me, bro. I don't even have a flannel shirt. Right?
Oh, I'm listening to everything you're saying. There's on both fronts. I mean, if you took an area and you made a mud bog pit and held that in conjunction with some of the tractor pulls, I think you'd get a lot of those diesel guys that'd be all over it.
Oh yeah, I mean, it'd be like a hobo and a ham sandwich. So I think. We get it done. I think it's going to be pretty cool, but we don't want to bite off more than we can chew and try to be all things to all people.
Right.
I mean, I had some real big dreams about doing something with an event for this year, and I spoke to a couple of people about it. And then, I stood back and I realized you're not good enough yet, dude.
Right.
You're just not. Your facility, your team is really good. Your ownership is awesome, but there's an arena that you don't belong until you've done some other stuff a little bit smaller, and get a little better. So
sure.
You try to bite off more than you can chew, and then you have to step back. And I think, we'll do the pulling truck thing, but we don't want to mangle our season to do it.
Right. Now, are you guys going to have some bleachers that you can put up at that end of the track?
I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know if we're going to just put up a bunch of tree stands. I don't know how that's going to work out, but I'll be there, like, totally into it, people watching, just digging it. That's going to be a lot of fun.
It will be. I've been to a couple of those events, and it's like nothing you've ever seen. I think that's really cool.
It's got to be. It's got to be like those people that take monster trucks seriously. They're so cool. I don't watch the trucks. I watch them.
Right. Yeah. I think it was in Caledonia. Caledonia used to have the Lucas Oil Tour come through, if my memory serves correctly. And we're talking about, the super modified tractors that, they look like tractors only because they have big back wheels on them. They got 4 motors spread across the chassis and stuff. And it was amazing. And that place was packed. I mean, it was packed with people.
Yeah. So I'm thinking that, some of these guys gotta have eaten a lot of lead paint as children, because these things are nuts. Yes. And drag racers think they're hardcore when it comes to parts breakage and parts replacement and maintenance schedules. I mean, these guys they're nuts. I mean, I can't imagine how big these farms are and these businesses that these guys own. I mean, just because that makes a drag car operation look like just a drop in the pond,
You got to look up I believe the name of the tractor was the Dutch Maid, if I'm not mistaken. And this was a pulling tractor out in Europe that was pretty popular. And it had an engine failure where the top half of the motor came out completely. And you could just look right down in. All the rest of the bottom half stayed there and the top came off the motor. And everything internally stayed connected. It was one of the most
awesome.
It was one of the most spectacular engine explosions I've ever seen. It was really cool. So if any of the drag racers are wondering what it's all about, they could. Sorry for the sidebar, but if any of the drag racers are wondering,
because you're taking me right into one of the things that I didn't say. We're going to have a real strict diaper policy next year.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Last day of the year, last car down the track. Or was he the second? Maybe it was it was the second to last. Test and tune of the year, last car that goes down the track. as soon as he lifts, knocks the rods out of it. I mean, just chunks of main cap, just crap everywhere. Mm-hmm. So he finally gets it shut down. He makes it to the end of the track. I mean, just the whole length of the shutdown lane. So the nice guy, you know, I mean, nothing disparaging about the individual. I'm sure that he's a great son and a better father. But his engine was just full of nitrous solenoids. Now, you know, I used a lot of nitrous. I'm not afraid of nitrous. I love nitrous. I have it with milk in the morning. But it's indicative of a type of racer sometimes. And anything with a power adder next year that is not OEM is going to have a diaper. That's all there is to it. I don't care what it runs. If you have a larger turbo in place of a stock one and it uses the stock fuel system and things of that nature, have at it, no problem. Right. But if we've got an LS motor with a turbo on it, I don't care if it runs 12s, it's going to have a diaper.
Again, it comes back to keeping the flow going, right? I mean, if something...
It was ridiculous this year. We had a guy in a Mopar. He knocked the bottom out of it at probably, 800-900 feet. Drove it all the way through down the shutdown, past the ET shack, got his slip, and drove it to his pit with a rod hanging out of the pan. I can't make this up, bro. I cannot make this up. This stuff happens.
I'm just upset, though. Why'd you have to say? I mean, it could have been a competitor. It could have been a class. It could have been anything. But no, you had to specify it was a Mopar guy. What was that all about?
Just because it's good to stir up crap. I figure my phone's going to blow up anyway, right?
Is that a deflection? Get them to complain about that, and they'll miss the 8th mile change?
Yeah, no. Now, mind you, I think I've purchased 4 Chrysler products off the showroom floor. So I'm just playing. I love them.
Okay.
3 of them were trucks. 3 of them were trucks, and one was a 1988 Daytona Shelby Z.
All right. Well, I guess that's not so bad.
It was a toilet. I mean, it was perfect to take to the disco and lean against the fender, and that's really all it was worth.
You got to have a plan, right?
Right. That and a cologne called Quorum. I don't know if you ever heard of that stuff. It's awful.
I have not. I've not heard of that. It sounds awful.
Yeah, it was bad. I think I covered everything, though.
It does sound like that. It does sound like we did. I appreciate you coming on and hanging out for a little while.
No sweat, dude. What
about for you next year? Are your duties going to stay about the same, or are you endeavoring to take a little bit more on?
I don't want to say I'm the heir apparent to who's going to take care of the facility when Jerry gets to a point that he doesn't want to do it anymore.
Sure.
But that's the way we talk about stuff. You know, it's the way he talks. And every day I'm going to be learning new things, and I am so not ready to even consider a role like that.
Yeah.
But he's a pretty good teacher.
Yeah.
He's all right. Yeah. He gives you a task. If you show that you can handle it a little bit, it's yours. Go figure it out. Other than that, he's a great teacher.
Right.
But no, he's been very patient with me. You know, he calls me the city boy because I don't know how to run any of his equipment. You know, I burned half the clutch out of his tractor figuring out how to drag the track. And, I mean, it was just bad. But I'm learning. I'm learning, and it's something that I look forward to if I'm ever needed to do it. You know, I'm happy with the role I have.
That's it's interesting as things have evolved over the last year. When one of our first conversations was, "Hey, you're going to be announcing," and now
exactly.
Now now look where you're at.
Well, you know, it's funny. After Asphalt Wars last year, there was a real big uptick in Jerry's interest in going a little faster. And it was a successful event. The track shined. And now he's got a little more confidence about doing that. He's got more people that he can bounce ideas off of, and I'm lucky enough to be one of them.
Right.
So it's a good time, you know, and we'll see where it takes us.
Is this where you expected to be?
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. I expected more, to be honest with you. I set a pretty high bar for myself. I think that our region sucks for small shows because we're an hour from anybody.
Sure.
But I think for a good sized show, we're awesome because we're only an hour from everybody.
Right. That makes sense. What just to wrap up, so how free is Jerry with the compliments? I mean, what's the most you get out of him? As growly as growly as he can be.
The best compliment I ever got from Jerry was through Jim Zakia. Do you know who Jim Zakia is?
I don't believe I've met him. No.
Jim's like in the Drag Racing Hall of Fame. I mean, Jim walks on drag racing water. He has been around forever. So Jim comes up to me, and I'm between the staging lanes, and he said, "I want to thank you. Good job today." And I said, that's fine, He says, "Yeah, I tried to give Jerry a compliment, but he pointed to you, and he says he's the guy that did it." That's a compliment.
Right.
Unfortunately, it was secondhand. I had to go around the bend to get it, but there was a compliment. Usually, real quick, and then I'll go. The conversation with Jerry is usually have like a few sentences where you communicate what the point is, and when he decides he understands it, and he decides that he no longer needs to be talking to you, you get the "I." Now, it's all right in Jerry. "I." So if you're ever on the phone with Jerry and he goes, "I," he just clicked his ears off. Thank him, hang up, try again another day.
Excellent. Well, it's good to know your boss, I suppose, right?
Well, here's the thing. It sounds a little creepy, but I really like the guy. Right. And I couldn't pick up all his tells like that if, you know where I'm coming from, if I didn't get a kick out of him. Absolutely. Because we are 180-degree different people, and that's probably why it works.
Yep, the yin to the yang, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I know you got some guests over there going over the plans for the wedding in a week. Congratulations, by the way.
Yeah, man, I'm marrying an amazing woman. Seriously, I mean, just an amazing woman. I can't imagine anybody that would be a better fit for anyone. The fact she's with me is somewhat mind-boggling. You listen to me on the phone, I'm like kind of got my thoughts together right now.
Right.
I'm a hot mess, and she puts up with it, and it's pretty badass.
She into drag racing? Does she go to the track?
No, she hates it.
Perfect.
yeah, but she loves what it does for me.
Right.
Because when I had my job in human services last, and then came back to drag racing working with Jerry, my energy level went through the roof.
That's good.
And that's all she cares about. So yeah, it's a good thing.
Well, it sounds like that's a little bit of the yin and the yang too. Opposites are attracting.
Yeah, and she keeps me in line. I mean, when I come home on Friday, I hand her my paycheck in full, and I have a debit card that I can get into the accounts, and I can, whatever. But I just trust her because I'm a mess, and it works out well.
That's awesome. Well,
yeah, it's all I can do to keep it together for Jerry. Then after I'm done keeping it together for him, I got nothing left for me.
It's too much. It's overload.
It's awful.
Melting down the reactor.
Yeah.
Well, I know you got some planning to do. I appreciate you making some time for us tonight to come and talk about all this stuff. I'm excited for the season. I hope everybody else that was listening this year tonight is excited for it too. I think it's a positive move.
I do too, and I'm just looking forward to a great year. Thanks, man. If you ever need someone to come in and just be long-winded, call me.
Hey, that's an open door. Anytime you want to come on. I mean, obviously, it's always better to see you in person than have you on the phone. But you guys had plans tonight, so I understand.
Yeah, that eye contact's kind of dreamy. I like that.
So yeah,
we'll do it that way next time.
We'll see what we can work out.
All right, Chris.
Thanks so much. We'll talk to you soon.
See you, buddy.
I know. There goes. Let's see. We got Jason Oldfield. Jason Oldfield was weighing in. Jason's wanting me to ask questions. He doesn't realize that we can't. He doesn't realize that we can't do the way that the studio is oriented. I can't look at his text messages and do the. I can't look at his text messages and do the phone call. So now I got Jason on the phone. Hey, man.
Hey, how are you?
I'm okay. What's new?
I'm good. I'm still driving, but I'm good otherwise.
Still driving. I know you had a couple questions that you wanted me to ask Pat. He's long gone now. before the show, I asked him about the banquet. He said that's basically Jerry's deal, and details are to come. And the rest of the sanction stuff, they've got a lot of stuff that they're going to work through first, but who knows what's going to happen.
Okay, all right. Well, yeah, I mean, he had mentioned on the podcast there that NHRA had come out and courted them 3 times, and as soon as I heard that, it's like, well, if there was no interest whatsoever for them to go NHRA, the first time they would have come out, they would have told them, hey, get lost, we're not interested, we're sticking with IHRA. But if they were out there 3 times, NHRA was either extremely persistent, but my guess is that the reason why NHRA would have been extremely persistent is because Empire would have given them some hint that they were potentially interested in switching.
Right.
So, yeah. So I heard that. That was, like I said, that was interesting. But I know all along that NHRA's deal is you have to have concrete barriers in order to switch to NHRA. So, overall, it didn't, well, I guess along the lines of there being talk of going to concrete barriers as well, that's kind of what made sense to me that, hey, is this happening? As Pat mentioned, the new IHRA format, quite frankly, the instant they announced that format, my first question was, why would any track do this? Because they could put a bracket race on themselves. They do every weekend, just at a smaller scale. So why would you really need the IHRA to do this? So obviously, Empire realizes that yeah, we can kind of do this on our own if we want to. Now, maybe there's more details yet to come that we haven't heard yet.
Sure.
But at this point, I think it seems like they really kind of thought this through, and they kind of know overall kind of what's going on.
Right. You cutting through Seneca Falls on your way through?
If you would like me to.
Yeah, why not?
Well, if you would like me to, then I absolutely will. I'm just passing Auburn right now.
Oh, okay. Cool. I got a little bit longer here after we get everything cleaned up from the show tonight. We'll get everything loaded up. But I did want to ask you that given that transition to 8th Mile, does this change in any way Western New York Super Rod Association?
Well, I guess I don't. I mean, obviously it affects us. Now the question is, it really depends upon whether or not is Empire going to run quarter mile at all? I mean, I guess if it were me, my overall suggestion would be to, and I had mentioned this last year to a couple guys, that if I was a track owner, because of the interest that people have in running 8th Mile around this area, I would have swapped the days or swapped the frequency. Rather than running 8th Mile once a month and running all quarter mile otherwise, I would run 8th Mile all the time and run quarter mile once a month.
Right.
Now, if they do that, then yeah, we might end up scheduling our races so that we always correspond with one of those weekends where they're running quarter mile.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't and they go just to an 8th Mile format, well, at that point, then yeah, our decision will be, okay, well, do we stick with just Empire and run just 8th Mile, or do we take the show on the road and go look for other tracks where we can run quarter mile? I mean, with Super Rod, Super Gas, it doesn't matter which. I mean, the index from the 8th Mile, 640, is 990 in the quarter. Yes, the throttle stop settings are completely different regardless of the throttle stop settings are different depending upon the track length that you're running, but otherwise it's really the same race. You do even the playing field, and you kind of alluded to that early in the show, that you even the playing field out a little bit because there's not that huge speed difference now between the fast cars and the slow cars.
Right.
So the slower cars should be happier about it than the fast cars will be. But yeah, what we're gonna do? I mean, I don't know honestly. I had a feeling that this might be coming, and I've said it before. I've said it before on the show that I prefer, if I could run half mile, I would, because it's more time in my race car. But the fact of the matter is, guys like running 8th Mile, and Norwalk. I mean, we're not that far from Norwalk. Norwalk's doing the same thing for some of their classes, especially classes like Super Pro. Guys want to run 8th Mile.
Right.
my guys, I mean, I would say most of my guys don't care, but, there are some guys that strongly prefer 8 mile. There's some guys that strongly prefer quarter. So I think it ends up being a wash for us, and then it probably just gets down to my own personal preference and whether or not I want to race 8 mile all the time, or maybe we look to take the show on the road. We were kind of exploring that anyways, just because it is fun to get out of town occasionally.
Sure.
We did some IHRA races last year, personally, where we went to Pittsburgh, and obviously we raced at Empire. We were planning on going to Dragway 42, and it was nice to kind of mix it up a little bit. And if we were to potentially go down to, let's call it, southwestern Pennsylvania or northeastern Ohio, we're already drawing competitors from that area, so it might make sense for us to look at going to one of those tracks for a couple of events. Who knows? I don't know.
Is it atypical to have a series that would bounce back and forth between quarter and 8th mile?
I will say that that's probably slightly atypical. Normally, like if you were to look at NHRA, I mean, all of their sportsman program races, they're all on quarter mile. IHRA, for the most part, in the old format, they were all almost exclusively 8 mile.
Yeah.
If you look at somebody like the 470 Thunder, I mean, they run, exclusively 8. It is a little atypical for sure to switch back and forth, but when you really get down to it, I mean, the real heart of it, I mean, we are just bracket racers, but it just so happens that we have fixed your index to a specific race or a specific number for every competitor, and we run on a pro tree rather than a handicap full tree. So, but it is slightly atypical to do that. But I will say that we did it last year. We had races that were both quarter mile and 8 mile last year. So, our competitors are somewhat used to it. But ideally you'd have one, and then that way you'd never have to switch it up. But everyone ends up generally being on the same playing field at the end of the day. So it's, I know that at the end of the year, Steve Torrance was kind of complaining about the fact that he lost the NHRA Top Fuel Championship to Brittany Force, and he wasn't happy about it because he dominated all season, and she got hot at the end of the season, ended up winning the championship because of it. Well, that's the rules, and everybody played by the same rules. So it's the same. It's the same with changing the track length. If you switch from quarter to 8, everybody has to make the same adjustments. So some guys will do it better than others, and those will be the guys that do well those days.
Sure. The Western New York Super Rod Association, would they see an uptick in cars in that 8th mile transition, or would that just be something to benefit the weekly track?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I guess I would say that, probably for us, I would guess that the biggest uptick that we would probably see is because of IHRA switching format. Again, we've run 8 and quarter. In theory, there should have been times where we could have potentially drawn competitors from the TNT Super Series to run with us, and didn't really see many, if any, cars kind of switch over. So the guys that were running the TNT Super Series, which is 1090 in the quarter, they wanted to run 1090 and a 510 Pro Tree. And the guys that were running the Western Super Rod Association that wanted to run 990 in the quarter on the 410 Pro Tree did that. And I don't really think course length is going to, for us, make somebody come race with us. It's really more of the style of racing.
Right.
Like I said, I think for us, the uptick that we will see probably will be mostly due to the fact that anybody that was running IHRA and really liked running what we'll call class style racing like we do, now have one less avenue to do that. And so we'll give those guys someplace else to go and compete. And I know that we fielded questions already from, again, a lot of guys from the southwestern Ohio and northeastern, or southwestern Pennsylvania and the northwestern Ohio or northeastern Ohio about, hey, if you guys thought about coming out this way, and or we're planning on coming out to Empire for a couple of races with you guys because we don't want to give up super gas and we don't really have any other avenue at this point.
And the good thing is Pat, when Pat Budd from Empire Dragway was on earlier tonight, they said that they're not throwing anything away. They're actually looking at doing a little bit of work to the shutdown area, and they're still going to keep the quarter-mile track there. It's not like it's going to be a rip-off or anything. Nothing's getting torn out.
Yeah.
And the upkeep's going to stay on it. So it's still going to be there. It's still going to be functional. Still going to be maintained. So to use it periodically, it doesn't seem like it's going to be too much of a stretch. And even if it doesn't go with the frequency of something like what you described, where it's eighth mile all the time with quarter mile once a month, even if it's not that frequent, it's still going to be there. And with the level, the degree of care and that meticulous mentality that Jerry and Patrick have in terms of taking care of the track, I don't think that it's going to fall into disrepair to a point where it's not going to be usable or it's going to be unsafe. I mean, they're looking at running concrete barriers the rest of the way and replacing the rails. So obviously there's some degree of plan for the rest of the facility.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't think you're going to see weeds growing through the pavement. Let's call it from the 660 to the 1320 or in the shutdown area, because nobody's running down there.
Right.
I don't know overall what the plans are. I guess they should know. I will say they will know better than I will as far as the speed of the program. Unfortunately for me, it doesn't. Running 8th mile is a bit of a pain. The way that the current shutdown is and where the turnoffs are, because I can't make the first turnoff. The only way I can really make the first turnoff is if I know that I'm going to dump, and I dump hard at the mile-an-hour stripe, then I can make that first turnoff. So once you miss the first turnoff, now you're in for the entirety all the way to the end of the track.
Right.
You got a 3,000-foot shutdown, so I mean you're coasting for a long time. I mean, I have to say that where I've run 8th mile there this year, I've gotten in the habit of switching the car, shifting the car into neutral and clicking it off, just because it's such a long drive at 60 miles an hour to get down to the end. So I don't know if the pace is really any quicker for the faster cars. For the slower cars, absolutely, because now for the slower cars, they can all make the first turnoff. Regardless, you're going to have cars that are going to still be going the whole length of the track because they can't make that first turnoff. But
right.
I hope they consider adding a turnoff midway between that first turnoff and the end of the track, because not only would it help with the speed of the program, and would be nicer for us, but it also helps coming up the return road, because now you don't heat the car up as much driving back the return road because you're not driving as far coming back either.
Right. Sure.
So
makes sense. And we're all.
So we'll see, but it's. I was surprised that they decided to utilize our forum as a method of kind of announcing it to the world. Like I said, I had kind of expected that this might be coming, but I guess we'll see. My personal guess is I think it's really good for the track. I think it'll be really good for the track. I know at least a half dozen guys that don't come out to Empire and compete on a regular basis because of it being quarter mile. They don't want to beat their stuff up. They don't necessarily like the extra speed. So I think overall it's going to be good for Empire, and some of the old school guys like me that just are diehard quarter mile fans. Well, we're just going to have to live with it or go find someplace else to race. So,
right. And they don't want that to happen. They're not trying to cut out the quarter mile guys to benefit the 8 mile guys either. So it's a slippery slope. They got to tiptoe a little bit, but I think with their mentality and the way that they're going about it, I think that those guys are going to be just fine. I think like you said, it's going to be good for the track. It's a good transition, and if you can find a way to better a racetrack these days, you might better take it.
Well, yeah, and I will say that again. I think it is good for it. I don't think you're going to see. From a quarter mile racing standpoint around this area, your options really are very limited. You could go out to Esta and Cicero. I don't even know if they run. It is a quarter mile track, but I don't know if they run quarter mile regularly or if they run 8 mile. I can't say that. Obviously, Spencer, when it was racing, was only 10th. Lancaster's only 8th. You could go up to Toronto Motorsports Park, but now you're dealing with the border that a lot of guys don't want to do or can't do because they don't have a passport or an enhanced license. So your options really are limited, and then you start saying, okay, well, what are my options as far as the quality of the racetrack? There's no denying that Jerry and crew have done just a fantastic job, and all the money they poured into there. it would really take a lot for me to say, you know what, I'm not going back to Empire to race on a regular basis because I don't want to race 8 Mile. And, I just don't see anybody from around here really doing that, quite honestly.
Yep. Well, I'm sure we'll have more announcements when we get to the banquet. That's scheduled in January. Further announcements are forthcoming on that. I think we've pretty much filled our hour for sure. Gone a little bit over here so far. We'll bench race a little bit more later on. Jason, what do you think?
All right, that sounds good. We got lots to talk about now.
Yeah, I'll meet up with you at Finger Lakes 1. I'll meet you here first.
Okay, that sounds great, Chris.
All right, we'll catch up with you later. Thanks a lot.
All right, thank you.
We'll see you.
All right, bye-bye.
There goes Jason Oldfield weighing in on the announcement that Empire Dragway going to go to an 8th Mile program next year. Interesting developments. We appreciate those guys for using our show to break that news. That means a lot to us, and we appreciate the support that we've had front to back from Empire and from Patrick and everybody. So we'll follow this as it develops. Also stay tuned. We'll be back in a couple weeks here to talk a little bit more about drag racing, what's happening at Empire, and the upcoming banquet as well. And we got a couple names to follow up on too, who are celebrating some season championships along those lines. And also we'll be keeping up on what happens with the Western New York Super Rod Association, ironically, if anybody can believe that. So lots of stuff going on. The off season has just begun. We've already got some big news. We'll keep up on that stuff and more here on the Final Round, coming to you from the FingerLakes1.com headquarters here in the North Park building at Academy Square. That's going to do it. We will see you again in a couple weeks. Everybody, have a happy and safe Thanksgiving.
This has been the Final Round Drag Racing Podcast, coming to you live from the FingerLakes1.com studios in downtown Seneca Falls, New York. We'll see you right back here again in 2 weeks. Thanks for watching.